heroin was a big deal. Don't know if you remember the Spider-Man burglar who was he used to climb up the outside of the buildings at Surfers Paradise.
I do remember mention of the Spider-Man.
Yeah, I've represented him.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a good old boy, but a proper long-term heroin user.
Welcome to Crime Scene Gold Coast with Guardian Criminal Law. My name's Mark Savic. I'm the principal of Guardian Criminal Law, and we'll be bringing you podcasts weekly. Variety of topics that can be very sensitive, so please be careful when you're listening, and if you need any assistance at all, we'll include a lifeline number at the bottom of the page. We really appreciate you subscribing and liking our podcast channel. You can listen to us across most social media platforms, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and you'll find us there. We look forward to bringing you many episodes in the future. All right, today we're here with Mr. Jason Buckland. How are you, Jason?
Yeah, Mark, it's great to be here. Good to see you, mate.
Thank you, mate. It's been a long time. I think like back in the 90s since we've seen each other.
It has, mate, yeah.
And you're at the bar here in Queensland now?
I am.
How long has that been?
Well, my first call to the bar was in December 2016, so this is my 8th year at the bar now.
And how's it going?
Yeah, great. I've done, my share of jury trials. I'm between trials at the moment, so probably average about 6 a year, I think. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in today. We're going to have a chat on Crime Scene Gold Coast about some crimes on the Gold Coast. We were chatting yesterday and you had some great ideas.
Yeah, well, you were very kindly invited me over to enjoy the afternoon on the back of your boat so we could catch up. I mean, as you said, we haven't seen each other for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it was good to have a catch up. I think the last time I saw you was, I think you were practicing in Coffs Harbour, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw you down there. But
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was down there for a long time.
For everybody that doesn't know, Mark was actually at the bar here, and that's how we met. So that would have been, we knew each other at the end of university, which was about 1993 for me.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and then I did my articles of clerkship when Southport was a bit of a country town. It's a bit of a bustling metropolis now.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, I do recall instructing you as a barrister in the district court in Southport in a civil matter once.
Okay.
So that was a very long time ago.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I don't do any of that anymore. And so we're here today. We're going to have a discussion about Fairly Arrow. You raised that yesterday. I've forgotten about that debacle.
Well, I was interested in your podcast. You've got the Crime Scene Gold Coast. So I thought it'd be interesting to perhaps talk about some famous or not so famous crimes, infamous crimes that occurred on the Gold Coast.
Absolutely. I'm with you.
Yeah, and the Fairly Arrow case sprang to mind. We managed to find an old YouTube clip of her demo. Back in the early 90s, Fairly Arrow was a bit of a local celebrity. Jupiter's Casino was the sort of big ticket, big venue on the Gold Coast in those days. The town was nowhere like the sort of town it is today. It was more of a seasonal place, as you remember.
Yeah.
So holiday times, the town would fill up with people from all over the country, and then in between school, when the kids went back to school, it was like a sleepy beach town to live in.
And it did have a community feel about it, didn't it?
It sure did.
Outside of that tourist sort of time, it felt like you did know people broadly through the Gold Coast. And I know that when I was a younger bloke then, it's not that you know everybody, but when I was going out, and I love live music, as do you. I know that you're a musician, you have your own band.
Yeah.
And I love live music. It's a great experience. So going to those venues, it's not that you know everybody, but you're familiar with the crowd. It was like you had a familiarity. You recognise the faces. It was the same faces and bodies. It's not like that anymore.
No. And it was an interesting time for me. My master solicitor was a World War II veteran. He was an Englishman who actually, he drove a bulldozer at Normandy. And he landed on D-Day +2, I think he said. So,
holy. And
his job was to drive his bulldozer up the beach and then knock the bluff flat so that the tanks could roll out of the amphibious tank carriers up onto the beach and start shooting at the Germans. And he told me that one of his the first recollection he had was he drove his bulldozer up onto the beach and there were bullets whizzing around and he put the blade down, jumped off it so he could hide underneath it away from the gunfire. And by the time he got off the bulldozer, there was no room for him because there were all these soldiers hiding underneath these bulldozers. So there wasn't, it wasn't quite like the Spielberg.
What was his name?
Fred Allenson.
And he's no longer with us?
No, he passed a few years ago now.
Wow, that's amazing.
But anyway, the reason I sort of segue off into that is because not only was the town full of people our age that we got familiar with, there were some old-timers from pretty historic events. There was a fellow who was in the, we were in the Doug Bar building, which is the one that was down on the corner of Nerang Street. I think it's still there. So, when Nerang Street was blocked off and they put the mall in there.
Yes.
It's been reopened now.
Yes.
But when the mall was opened, we were down there. And so Suncourt was on the corner. I mean, it's short. You throw a stone out of your window and hit it from here.
Yeah.
But in the office next to us was an old fellow who was a retired man who was the chairman of the Southport Chamber of Commerce. And he wore like a Hawaiian style shirt, but it was a Gold Coast fabric. It was a print, but it was proper 60s Gold Coast, with, the pink pearl on it and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
I always was envious of the shirt. I wanted one. I thought it was cool because I was playing in a band at that time and I thought it'd be funny to wear one on stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one day I had cause to go into his office. Fred wanted me to speak to him. And I was aware that he'd been the Postmaster General of Southport before he retired. And this was just something to keep him active. And when I walked in, there was this enormous sort of picture on the walls, a giant photograph of a Lancaster bomber with, crowds of people in front of it, everybody associated with the flying of this aeroplane. And I sort of noticed it and went back in to see Fred. And I said, I noticed that Keith's got a great big photograph of a Lancaster bomber there in his office. What's the story with that? And Fred said he was a pilot who flew 50 bombing missions over Germany.
Wow.
Yeah, and these were just people that were your next door neighbours.
Well, it's funny you should say that. When I was a small boy, I was only about 6 or 7, and Mum and Dad and I lived in a small flat in Shell Harbour, which is on the south coast of New South Wales.
Yep.
And the owner of those flats had a big home next door, and his name was Headley Johnson, and he was a real estate agent in Shell Harbour, and he was a bomber pilot as well in the Second World War.
Yeah, that's
amazing guy.
Yeah, well, anyway, I mean, it's you can't help but marvel because he was that, no doubt, as your neighbour was as well. He was just a very unassuming man, a nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you wouldn't credit that he'd flown an aeroplane that you probably wouldn't get in these days 50 times into Germany at night time to drop bombs and kill people, and while he was being shot at. So
that's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
And not many of them left anymore. If any, there would be none.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So there's no more from the First World War, I don't believe.
No, they're all gone.
And there would be very few, if any, from the Second World War.
Mm.
Oh, a few in the 90s.
Yeah, okay.
No. They'd have to be in their hundreds, wouldn't they?
Well, where are we now? 2023. So it ended in 45. So if you were born then, you'd be 70 now, so 68. So I think there had to be 20 to serve. So 88.
98.
Although 98. Yeah, my grandfather is 96, and he was too young to serve. In fact, my son and I took him to lunch not recently, and my grandmother passed a couple of months ago, and he was pretty sad. So we thought we'd take him out for lunch, and it was to try and cheer him up. I was trying to knock the conversation off, the topics that were upsetting him. And he started talking about when he met my grandmother and how he was a bit of a man about town in the day, and how he knew all the dance halls, and he lived underneath the Sydney Harbour Bridge in an apartment with his mother. And I asked him what year they got together, and I think he said 1947. And I said, and how old were you then? And he said, I don't know, 18, 19, something like that. And I said, well, you would remember when the Japs torpedoed the boat at, when they...
In Sydney Harbour.
Yeah, the ferry that had the sleeping things on. And he just came to life and told a story like it was yesterday. It was...
Really?
Yeah, it was terrific. And told it in a way that was surprising. It was like listening to somebody telling a story about... Well, I recently lived through the floods in Lismore. And now if you talk to people down there, it's a pretty, matter-of-fact sort of a conversation. But he was pretty much the same about, Japanese submarines in Sydney Harbour. He told me about the boom gate. They had a boom gate that caught one of them. And
net.
And I think he also said that there was some shelling on the North Shore. But I think what happened was that it was, our own people got overexcited and started. I think there were more casualties, almost more casualties from friendly fire than they were from Japanese intervention.
I remember seeing that submarine that they caught. It's on display at the War Memorial in Canberra. It's like a steel coffin, man. There's nowhere to move in it.
Yeah,
it's a one-way trip. It's not.
No,
you're not going on sightseeing in it. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Let's move on. Let's move on.
Yeah, we've veered off, but anyway.
Fairly
so
arrow.
Back in the 90s, the casino was the place to be. Also, in terms of entertainment, it was a time when people could actually make a reasonable living from being an entertainer. Fairley was married. Her husband was in an outfit called the Four Kinsmen, and they were
They were entertainers, weren't they? I remember the name of them. Yeah, describe them for me. I'm sure I've seen them on television.
Yeah, they did. They toured around. They were your typical, Twin Towns, Seagulls, Jupiter's Casino circuit sort of band, and they would do covers, but they would dress in theme, and they were quite good, terrifying mimics. So they were good at doing covers, but they would also sometimes dress in theme to the song or would dress as the band.
Okay.
That sort of thing. And I think they had some songs of their own that were novelty type hits. But anyway, so Fairley was married to one of the Four Kinsmen. She had been, what happened was it was I think it was the 14th of December, 1991, 15th of December, 1991. A friend went to the police station at Broadbeach and said that they'd gone around to visit her. She was living in a house at the Isle of Capri. She'd only recently moved there from Mudgeeraba. Now, in the months leading up to her disappearance, she had complained to the police about a man breaking into her house and writing messages to her in lipstick on her mirror in the bathroom. I don't know whether that was true. There was never nothing ever came of that I'm aware of, or whether that was part of the elaborate hoax to set the scene for her kidnapping. And so what took place was that it was about 10 o'clock at night that her friend went to the police station and said he'd gone around to visit, had found her car door open and the keys to her house in her front door, and raised the alarm. Police the next morning held a press conference in front of media, and in fact there was an impassioned plea by a local police officer for the kidnapper to bring her back. Speculation about the fact that it was a crazed fan. And so there was a fair bit of media hype around it. It was, nationwide and probably worldwide publicity.
She was a very attractive woman too.
Yes.
So that would have had some bearing on, thinking someone might have pinched her. I'm sure Connor will organise a picture of Fairley Arrow.
Well, not only that, in the aftermath of all this, she got a gig with Penthouse magazine, and
That's right.
She posed nude, and somewhat provocatively. There's some pictures. I can find some photographs. I've got one here. That I'll show Mark, but hopefully.
Yeah, we'll get some. We'll definitely
put this up on the screen
pics
for you, ladies and gentlemen. But
we'll definitely get some pics and some links to the Penthouse article.
What happened was 2 days after Fairley's disappearance, and there were newspaper reports at the time. It was big news. I mean, I was still at university because it was 1991, so I was in my second year of my law degree. But I was doing.
Me too.
I was doing work experience here in Southport at the Crown. Yeah. So, and again, as you said, small town, you knew everybody. So the police who were on the television were people that you knew. Yeah. Because, that was a small town. And it was a big deal there. 2 days later, she was found by two young blokes who were driving out at Mudgeeraba. They found her, in fact, so I've actually got the newspaper report from Wednesday, December 18, 1991, and the banner headlamp is fairly bound beside road. Bound.
So she's tied
Tied up.
Yeah,
So,
please tell us.
So it was two young men noticed a woman as they drove past. They did a U-turn and went back to her aid. They described her to be struggling and bound with rope, and she had her hands tied behind her back.
Okay.
And what happened was one of them stayed with her by the roadside, and the other one got in the car and drove to Wallaby Bob's, the pub, to raise the alarm. So the first alarm, the first shouts of "she's alive, we've found her," came to the front bar of the Wallaby Hotel.
And they didn't unbind her and put her in the car.
Well, I'd
take her to the hospital or the police station.
Yeah, they just
one
decided
of them stayed with her.
Left her where she was, and one of them went. And I think the police. Reading between the lines, police went to the scene, found her, and she was taken away from there. Over the following days, she actually went to the police station and made a written statement, because ultimately she was charged with the offence of making a false statement and making a false complaint. But she gave a statement to police, and in the police statement she was saying things. She alleged that she went to her front door, and when she got to the front door, somebody put something over her head. She assumed it was a pillowcase, and then tied her hands and feet with some kind of a soft material and chucked her in a car and took her away. And then she alleged that she was kept bound on a 4-post bed, so in sort of starfish type position, bound up for 2 days with a still blindfolded.
That wasn't the Penthouse shoot.
No, well, what happened was that when they shot her in Penthouse, well, when they this is
you're joking.
No, I am not joking. Like that,
they shot her in Penthouse.
They tied her up in a bed.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Yeah, that's going to be good to see.
Yeah. So anyway, you, ladies and gentlemen, you get to see imagery of that. Hopefully,
yes. Yeah.
So fairly made there was. And the police, as you were right, because the police also found something written. Well, what had happened in the lead up is that she'd gone to the police and complained about somebody breaking into her house and writing a message to her in lipstick on her mirror, "You left me." And so what the police did when they were sort of reaching out for public support and help is they surmised that it was possibly the same person. It was a crazed fan, because they had put 2 and 2 together and got 58, and decided that the message was because this person was enraged that she'd moved houses, and it took him some effort to catch up with her and find out where she was living, which is why they surmised that he wrote this. Which is anyway. So she complained of being in that position for 2 days, and that this fellow was sitting on the bed with her and just repeating the same phrase over and over. Something to the effect of, you've blown it. I gave you a chance, and now I've given you a chance, and now you've blown it. Something to that effect. So, but I mean, I can't really be criticised for being incorrect, because it turned out that what she was saying was lies, or was invented.
So how did they eventually flush it out?
What she'd actually gone and checked into a motel at Nerang. It was right next to the old Albert Shire Council building. I think there's still some council buildings out there, but if you're driving on the M1 and you're heading north, just before the turnoff that takes you onto Southport Nerang Road, you can the highway goes over a bridge, and right next to that bridge was a seedy old motel that used to be the sort of crime capital of Australia.
Okay,
and Fairley had checked in there, but what had happened is that a cleaner who was at the motel recognised her and came forward and told the police that.
So she'd been checked into that seedy motel.
Yeah,
during the time she alleges she was kidnapped.
Yeah, she was just watching the coverage on television from the comfort of a motel out at Nerang.
Okay, so a cleaner at the motel.
Cleaner at the motel came forward and told the police that
right.
They thought it was her, and then the story unravelled. She ran away to Sydney, announced to the world that she'd separated from her husband. Or in fact, it was her husband. I think his name was Michael Harvey, now that I think about it. He held a press conference and said, she's left me. And she went to Sydney with her new love interest, it's assumed, because there was photographs of her in the picture with a friend who was a sort of the tall, strapping, muscular chap that you described earlier.
Yeah.
And so ultimately the police charged her with the offence of making a false complaint. The media reports now, as then, were to the effect that they slapped her with an $18,000 bill. I mean, that's classic Gold Coast Bulletin, journalistic style. But I think what happened was, as part of the negotiations between her lawyers at that time and the police, she agreed to pay costs associated with the police involvement in it, and I think it was just, they had some extra people on. I don't know that, really the police just used the media.
I think she was fined as well.
Yeah, she got a $5,000 fine.
$5,000 fine.
Ultimately pleading guilty. But in the aftermath of the other thing that happened was that her accomplice, Big Bob Deering, came. He confessed to the police as well.
Was he the one that tied her up and left her on the side of the road?
No, well, I don't think that was ever. I don't think he ever got to that.
So that's still a mystery.
Well, I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything that identified who that person was. But he spoke to police. In the media reports, it's clear that he spoke to the police and told them that he assisted her. And I mean, I think one of the quotes were that he got to Saturday, or he got to the second night, and he thought it was getting too hot, and he was sort of pleading with her,
Yeah, I saw an interview with him.
Enough's enough.
I saw an interview with him where he said he was telling her, look, this just isn't going to wash. It's just not going to fly.
Yeah. So anyway, but and then there was some skepticism in the weeks that followed that it was made up, and then there was media pressure on her. So there was, and she gave a press conference outside of the police station where she said, it was, yes, it improved my profile, and I got publicity, but not necessarily good publicity, and there are easier ways to raise your own profile and get publicity.
Oh, so that was her reason. So that's the reason she offered, that she just wanted to.
Well, no. What she said is what she was saying initially is that I don't need to do this because I am famous. But
right,
yeah. So
and then
ironically, she wasn't.
What her justification was, she just wanted to get attention.
Yeah. So her career had hit a bit of a slump, so she was trying to propel herself. And in the aftermath, as we said, she was there was a popularity in the 80s and 90s in Australia at the time when something would happen, it was treated seriously, and then in the aftermath, the jokes would come out. And there were fairly, jokes. And apparently, in one of the,
I can't remember them. I know. What
yeah,
you
well,
mean.
there was one mob that actually released bumper stickers for cars that said "re-kidnap Fairly Arrow." So people were made some money off it as well. But and then ultimately, after it all sort of died down, and she moved to America, and as far as I can see, she's been there ever since.
Yeah, I had a look. She was involved in some television production and presentation, and there was a fellow that was also working with her. They interviewed him on the television, and he said, "I wish somebody would really kidnap her." So she wasn't making friends quickly over in the States either.
No,
and then I saw that she's singing again. She's fronting a country rock type of outfit in the United States, and has her own television production company as well.
Well, there you go.
And I saw a quote of hers. I can't remember it word for word, but it was along the lines of, I don't think I'll ever be settled down with a man full time. I think I'll die an old lady at home surrounded by animals and mainly horses.
Oh.
So, so looks like she's
I hope the horses are outside of her house, not in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe she's going to live in a barn.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? But so it's gone full circle. It appears. She's saying she doesn't want any attention anymore. Yeah.
Great.
Well, that's an interesting Gold Coast case.
Yeah,
mate.
so that was the Gold Coast was really on the map in that sort of time period. In fact, not only that, I noticed interestingly it was around the same time that Paul Keating ousted Bob Hawke for the prime ministership of this country.
Wow.
It was the first time that had happened, I think, in mid-office, and then it sort of became a monotonous regularity thereafter. But
yes.
yeah, so it was a big time.
It was a big
It's
time.
a different world, ladies and gentlemen.
It was. But, it was just in the early 90s.
Mm.
We were both at university,
We were.
visiting Surface quite often.
Yes.
Cavill Avenue doesn't seem to have changed much.
I wouldn't know. I don't really go there. I've been there during the day.
Yeah.
My closest connection with it now is representing people who get in trouble down there. So all I can talk about is CCTV footage I've watched from that area. Really.
What's your view about crime on the Gold Coast in general?
Oh, I tend to think it's changed. It's changed in scope. When I was a young man and I first started doing crime, I first started appearing in the criminal courts when I was admitted as a solicitor in April 1996. And my first court-related work was appearing as duty lawyer in the Southport Magistrates Court on a Saturday. I was only 26, and in those days that was extremely young for somebody to be appearing in court. Everybody who was in court was in their 40s.
Yeah.
And I was only trusted with the Saturdays at that time because it wasn't a big day. But I sort of grew up, my practice grew out of that. I over my own firm, I was on the legal aid panel, legal aid would refer work, and I started doing duty lawyer work, and word got out. In fact, there used to be a newspaper column that was on Saturdays called Court Confidential, and apparently it was in the Gold Coast Bulletin. It was one of the most was the second most read column according to surveys in that newspaper. People would go out on Saturdays to buy the paper just to do that. I mean, I did because I'd be in it every now and again. Used to keep a scrapbook of it. I don't know where it is now, but
There was a column in the 70s. One of our guests and solicitors that works here now is Mr. Colin Greaterix. And
yeah, I know Colin.
you know Colin.
I do.
Everybody in the criminal law.
Everybody
will know
knows Colin.
Absolutely. And Colin was.
There's a rumor that he doesn't play guitar.
I'll let you wear that.
Yeah, no.
And Colin was talking about he used to be one of the original guys that was doing a column. I don't know if it would have been the Bulletin back then in the 70s. It probably was.
Well,
and he was doing a legal column.
What was the radio station that was on Bundle Road? Was it
I can't remember.
4GG or something? Or
He mentioned that too. I think
Yeah,
you're
no,
correct.
well,
That rings a bell.
was my
Yeah, he was on there.
He had a radio
doing
show.
A radio show. That's
Right.
right. It wasn't a column. Yeah, he was doing a radio show on 4GG.
well, the reason I know is because
something
my mother-in-law, when I was married, remembered him and didn't like him. She took exception to him. Thought he was didn't like his attitude. But Colin was a bit of a freewheeling dude. I mean, he dropped out of the law and just became to become a musician for many years before making his re-entry into the profession in the late 90s. So he was a wild man back in the day.
Yes, a bit left wing, we might say. He was talking about him wearing caftans and going on holidays to exotic places back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, no, he was an outlier. There's no doubt about it. But he's still a great fella. It's always nice to talk to him. It's good to see him still around. I can't say that when I reach that stage, I'll still be going to a courthouse. I think I've had enough.
Yeah. Me
Anyway,
too.
back to crime on the Gold Coast.
Gold Coast, yes.
When I first started my practice, the drug of choice was heroin, and it was a dreadful kind of a drug because it would seize people who were sort of comfortable middle class would become addicted to heroin, and then the targets of their criminal activity would be their families, and they would be forever stealing their grandmother's jewelry and pawning it, and beating up their parents and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So there was heroin was a big deal because I don't know if you remember the Spider-Man burglar who was he used to climb up the outside of the buildings at Surfers Paradise.
I do remember mention of the Spider-Man.
Yeah, I've represented him.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a good old boy, but a proper long-term heroin user. So most of the crime was there wasn't that much sex crime back in those days. There was occasionally when it was reported, it was the more serious kind of stuff. It was usually violent violent rapes. I mean, not that I'm saying that sex crime is in any way, shape, or form agreeable, but it seems that there was less report of it back in those days. I don't know whether it was happening any less.
Yeah, don't do sex crime.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. That camera. Yes. Make sure you
avoid sex crime as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's it. Always ask permission.
Yes. Before
and
sex crime.
And re-ask. So most of it was a lot of property crime. So it was targeting businesses, and the amounts of money that would be involved were always significant. And the police were pretty much at war with the pawnbrokers because they were the obvious source of fencing it. Because people would go and you could take televisions and VCR players in those days were big money items, and they'd go into if you wanted to buy one, it was if you wanted to buy a VCR, it was $1,000, and they'd take them down to the pawnbrokers and get $10 or $15 for them.
Yeah.
So there was, and that was most of it. And then the other kind of crime was violence, and it was usually pub violence. So there was the odd murder. In fact, I think I got to say, the murder rate doesn't appear to have increased to me, but the population has significantly in the last 15 years, I suppose. What happened is one day it seemed as though heroin was out of favour and the new drug of choice was crystal methamphetamine. Because I remember my first encounter with it was I had in terms of, I've never taken it, but in terms of a client that was addicted to it, I had a fellow who was an old heroin addict, and he was usually a pretty placid sort of a fellow. And the watch house staff said, you got to come and see him. He's going off his head. And they had him locked in one of the rooms where you can have a conference. When you're in the watch house, there's a series of rooms. In Southport, there's 3. They have a sheet of glass between them. Well, when I first started, if you wanted to go and see your client in the watch house, they'd just put you in a room with them. And it was a cell. So you actually went in and sat in a cell with your client and took your instructions on your knee.
Yeah, exactly. Sitting on the concrete slab.
Yeah, that's right. In the 90s, when they reopened the second, they opened the new watch house and sort of extended courthouse, that you had the luxury of having sort of a platform that you could put your book on and write on, and then a sheet of glass. But anyway, so I got up there, and this fellow was jumping around and yelling his head off and just making no sense at all, and punching the glass and talking complete gibberish. So I just said, all right, well, that's all right. I actually went in and saw the magistrate and said, he's not fit to be brought before the court. So, don't bring him over, because it'll be, it'll just be bad. There seemed to be a lot more of that then, but I mean, I don't really go into those courts that much.
You heard about my incident?
No, I didn't.
You'll notice that in courtrooms now, you'll notice that in the dock, there's the glass that separates, or the perspex, that separates the person in custody from the courtroom.
Yep.
And you'll notice that at the top of that piece of glass, there's a gap that's about 50 centimetres, 60 centimetres.
Yep.
And in that gap, there's now...
Yeah, it's wire.
Wire.
Yeah.
There wasn't until this day. Okay? There wasn't until this day. So what happened was that always used to be a gap. There was never any wires up there.
Okay.
And so I was representing a client in Cairns courthouse.
Yep.
And the client was in custody. I went into the cells and I'd interviewed him. Same situation you're talking about, perspex or glass in between us in an interview room situation. And he'd instructed me to make a bail application on that day. And I'd let him know that chances were not great that he'd make bail on that day.
Yep.
Now, I can't remember the date. I do still have the paper clipping somewhere, but it was the day of the budget being released.
Okay.
It was a Monday.
Yep.
It was budget release. Joe Hockey was the treasurer at the time. He was releasing the budget on a Monday. It was a big deal.
Yep.
This happens on that Monday. Right? We're in court. The client's refused bail and he's not handcuffed, and he decides, I'm out of here.
Yep.
So he jumps up and grabs the top of the glass, and he's a strong young fellow, athletic young fellow.
Yep.
And all of a sudden he's through the gap and he's now in the courtroom.
Yeah, okay.
So the security guard, Blackie, lovely guy, he'd assisted me many times in the watch house, really nice man. He was an older fellow, probably in his late 50s, early 60s, he was working in security. He goes to try and detain the young fellow, and they have a scuffle, and they're scuffling on the in front of the bar table. As they've fallen down on the ground, they've reached out, and all the papers and everything on the bar table and the lectern and everything just goes bang. The prosecuting sergeant, she attended to the people sitting in the gallery and sort of made a shield between everything that was happening and those people and said, please, everybody get out. The magistrate left at 100 miles an hour, and which he's trained to do. They're trained to do, and he's a lovely magistrate, and so he's following his protocol.
Yes,
but unfortunately, he had the surname of Getz.
So, I know him.
Yeah, and so the jokes started pretty quickly about get out of there, Getz.
Yeah, right.
Which is unfair because the man's obviously trained. That's the risk management protocol. So the young bloke then starts to kick Blackie in the head. And I thought, well, can't stand by. Couldn't sleep at night if you watched poor old Blackie getting kicked in the head. So I dive over the bar table and I tackle the guy, my own client. I tackle my own client, right? And I'm on top of my client now. I've got him in a headlock. And I've got him a bit of an arm lock too under one leg. And I've just spoken to him and said, look, mate, this is really bad. It's going to end up badly. Let's try to salvage what little we have here. And then all of a sudden the police were there and he was being handcuffed and I received a commendation from the Queensland Police.
Excellent.
Offer of employment to join prosecution corps about a week later. So, and I was working for...
Is that how you get a job there?
Yeah. You got to do some pilots.
So, you got to tackle a client.
I was working for the Torres Strait Aboriginal ATSLs, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Legal Service up in Cairns. Fantastic organisation. I can't commend ATSLs more highly in Queensland. Great crew. And I was working for them and I was on probation. I'd only just started work for them. It was about 2 or 3 months in. And part of the rules of employment with ATSLs is strictly no media. You're not to say anything to the media, nothing at all. It's very clear in your contract of employment. Well, when I walked outside of the courtroom, the media were there and they said, look, could we just take a photo of you and just a couple of words? And I thought to myself, the budget's been released today.
How?
The front page of the paper tomorrow is going to be Joe Hockey. So I thought, bugger it, I will. It'll be a little article on the third page. It's just a Cairns Post, right? It's just the Cairns Post. So it's just for a bit of a laugh for the guys in the office. My office manager was a lovely man. He's still a mentor to me. So I said, okay. They took a photo of me out front of the courthouse and asked for a couple of words. And I said, look, I was just trying to help my client not to get into further trouble. He could have been shot if he'd, under those circumstances quite easily. Imagine if he grabbed a pen and held it to someone's throat or something like that. Out of desperation. It could be very tragic. Not to mention, the best case scenario is going to face more charges and maybe more time in custody. So I simply said to the paper, words to that effect, just trying to help my client, just trying to help the young fellow, get on the straight and narrow and improve his lot. So the next morning, it's on the front. I get back to the office. So I get back to the office. I go and see my boss. I said, mate, I know it's against the rules. I've sort of done this just for a bit of a laugh for the guys because that's the first thing they do in the morning at morning tea. They grab the newspaper and they flick through it. I thought that'll be a laugh for them, my colleagues. And my boss said, oh, mate, what have you done? Because by that time he'd built up a real affection for me and I for him. And we'd worked very well together and he gave me some great advice and he was pleased with me. So he didn't want me to go anywhere. Now I'd endangered that. So he got in touch. He was very proactive. He got in touch with ATSL straight away and said, look, there's been a mistake made here. And he took charge of it. And so the next day, here it is, front page of the paper. And it makes the international papers. And there's articles written in law magazines in England, which you must read them. Connor, you'll find it and you'll put a link,
I'll
up
watch
to
the podcast and I'll see the screens.
where they embellish the whole story so much. It's talking about me as potentially being recruited into the Wallabies because of my tackling skills in the courthouse. They embellished it so much. It's a really funny read. I went through that. So as a result, all of the courthouses in Queensland were retrofitted with those wires.
So you couldn't get out.
Yep. So every time you're in a courthouse now, you'll look up there and you'll just be picturing me scuffling on the ground.
That's the Savic wire.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, back to my story from before is this fellow who'd appeared before the magistrate and we didn't take him before the magistrate because he was in too bad a condition. He wrote me a letter in the intervening period of 3 weeks saying I hadn't slept for 3 weeks. I'd been taking ice. I got to the stage where every time I walked, the ground was sending electric shocks into my feet, and I thought I was being chased by a gang. So the reason I robbed this service station was, because I needed money to get out of town or some nonsense like this. And then he wrote on the bottom of it, I want to raise intoxication as a defence. And when I saw him, I said, well, unfortunately for you, intoxication doesn't work like that. It's got to be, you went to the senior prom, you drank the punch, someone put vodka in it, you didn't know. And he looked at me completely dead face and said, someone spiked me drugs.
Wow.
So that was my first run across methamphetamine.
What year was that?
Well, I started my own practice in 2001, and I was pretty well established by the time this came along. So I reckon it would have been 2006, 2007.
Okay.
It's the first time I came across it.
Okay.
And the nature of crime changed from then to property crime was just sort of then turned into people stealing cars largely. I mean, I'm sure there's still burglaries taking place, but I don't see as much of it as I used to. And then violence, because the sort of effect of being intoxicated by those sorts of drugs for an extended period of time, the superhuman strength, apparently, which people are imbued with when they use it, that sort of thing. And a lot of it was violence among people that were using it, and also against police when they were trying to stop people. So that sort of changed. And then domestic violence and that sort of crime has increased dramatically, but there's been a policing attitudes towards that have been significantly changed. So I think that's just, I don't know that it's happening any more than it ever did, but I think it's just the culture now is that if anything remotely goes into that territory now, you go to the police, and instead of back in the olden days, your parents would get involved and sort of sort you out, or your friends or something would, if you're having a hard time with your wife and that sort of thing, that was the community would wade in, whereas now it seems to be, pick up the phone, call the police, and before you know it, you've got orders and that sort of thing. And not that I'm saying that's a bad thing; it's just a change in the shape of criminal law. And I'm pretty sure the list in that domestic violence court's pretty significant.
It is, and some of the allegations, and I have to couch this in some terms that magistrates use, where they say any act of domestic violence is a serious offence. And so, any act of domestic violence is a serious offence, but I've seen in the last 12 months a client get charged with common assault because he threw a pillow at his partner while she was laying on the couch, just to wake her up and say, look, go and sleep in bed because you're not getting a decent night's sleep on the couch.
Yeah, okay.
Domestic violence order was put in place for those reasons. So
do not form long-term meaningful relationships with any of the humans.
Yeah.
That's not very good advice, I don't think.
No.
That was a joke. All right.
Yeah. Right. With the meth, I did a little bit of study of figures when I was up in Cairns, and I was interested in what sort of percentage of the work had methamphetamine as a component of the offence. So we might be looking at a break and enter offence, which is a very common offence up in Cairns, was a break and enter offence, and it usually looked like this. It was 2, 3, 4 youths, young people, and they break into a home. Quite often, most of the time, people were at home. They would then take the keys of the car and the credit card from the bowl on the dining table or the kitchen bowl, where we all leave our stuff when we come home. and they would steal the car.
Yep.
Go to usually service station was first port of call.
Oh yeah, for the petrol drive-off, or to use the credit card.
You use a credit card under $100. Just
Yep.
swipe, tap, and go.
Yep.
So they usually get a bit of fuel if they needed to.
Some cigarettes.
Some cigarettes. And some snacks for the kids, lollies and things like that.
Yeah.
Next stop, bottle shop.
Mm.
They get whatever alcohol they need under $100, tap and go.
Yeah.
And last stop, McDonald's.
Yes. Right.
And
yeah. Of course.
McDonald's or Hungry Jack's or Kentucky, whatever. They get a heap of food, under $100.
Mm.
Then they go back home or to a friend's place. They share that around.
Yep.
Then they pass the card and the vehicle onto Cousin Joe or whoever.
Yeah.
And then he goes and does the same thing. And then third in line or fourth in line usually gets done.
Yep.
So that was a very common offence. And at that time, I identified methamphetamine as a component in 65% of the matters that we had.
Yeah.
12 months later, I did the same analysis and it had gone up to 93.
Yeah.
So I was in Cairns. And I did a similar thing when I came to the Gold Coast in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And there was far less here at the Gold Coast than there was in Cairns. That surprised the hell out of me.
Mm.
I think maybe there's some other drugs of choice here. I see there's a lot of cocaine.
Yeah, I was going to say cocaine.
Yeah.
Seems to be, and there's a bit, there is a perception that that's a drug that's used. I mean, I don't know. I don't go out, so I don't see it. But I am aware of people. I know people that tell me stories about, going out on someone's boat, for example, and that sort of thing. Sanctuary Cove.
I am seeing that it's used very, very broadly across a broad range of the community now here at the Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost it's accepted as an acceptable social drug to have on the weekends. In the couple of places that I go to occasionally, and the age group is like predominantly, say, 35 to 55 sort of age group. So it's a more mature age group. Mm-hmm. People that are doing really well financially, they have great businesses and home lives. Mm-hmm. Cocaine's just a part of their weekend.
Right, okay.
So, and that's something that I never saw back in the 90s, the early 90s. I'm sure it was here, but back then I was going to nightclubs in town. I was a young man and I never was exposed to it. I'm sure other people were, but I wasn't exposed to it.
Yeah, I've had much the same experience as, you went to nightclubs and you drank alcohol. That's what you did.
Exactly. You drank alcohol. I was exposed to cannabis.
You smoked cigarettes because you could smoke cigarettes inside in those days.
Smoke cigarettes, and then there'd be joints going around sometimes.
Yes,
there'd be cannabis. But outside of that, I didn't see too much back then.
No. Well, it seemed that, and that's why there was always a bit of it's not why, it seemed that magistrates would always give people speeches about marijuana being the gateway drug, the pathway to more serious drugs. And in those days, it was basically marijuana, heroin. That was it. You just if
what
you went
bullshit. What absolute bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, although I did see LSD seems to be making a bit of a comeback. I've noticed a few more people being charged with offences relating to that at a larger scale.
Yep.
And then the fantasy and that sort of thing, because there's a cleaning fluid that can be treated chemically and then transformed into that stuff without much,
I don't know much about that. But there's the cocaine, MDMA, so ecstasy, those sort of pills. They're very big. Pure MDMA's very big.
Yeah.
But psychedelics are getting a really good rap on social media.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For all of the,
Joe Rogan talks about mushrooms and how you got to have your. What's that fellow? The
Hancock.
Yeah,
Graham Hancock,
and I mean, I had the misfortune to read one of his books. I found it pretty hard going, and just a clunky prose style and fantastic ideas that were. It was just a series.
So Graham Hancock is a journalist.
Supposition, and but one of his big things is there's a trip you can do down in South America that's ayahuasca. Yeah, so he thinks it's something that one simply must do. And must do regularly to, get in touch with their higher self.
I have some experience with that.
Oh yeah, did you meet yourself or meet your fuzzy being outside? Or
I had experience with DMT.
Oh right, okay.
Dimethyltryptamine.
And Don't do it.
No, absolutely. I would recommend that, but it's illegal,
Yes,
so you're not
you
allowed
can't
to
do
do
it,
it. But the experience is incredible, quite short-lived. So do you know anything about this?
Nothing, I must say. Yeah, I'm not.
So this chemical occurs in all living things.
Okay.
And it's produced by living things. Apparently, it's produced by humans only twice in your life. So it exists within you, but it's only sort of produced, activated, whatever, you've sensed it, at birth and at death.
Oh, right.
So Rogan talks about you believing that you have died.
Yep.
I didn't have that sensation, but everything he talks about, I did have that sensation. What's amazing about this drug is that it doesn't matter where you come from, what cultural background you come from. The experience is always similar. It has many same features. And one of the features is Aztec symbols and very bright colours. Okay. And so I think, and somebody might be able to fill us in here, but I think that those people must have been using this, or ayahuasca's I think it's very, very similar. And so that sort of art form came out of this journey, right? Out of a vision journey. And it is so real that you actually leave this place and you go to another place and you go on a journey. It's only about 10 minutes long. Yep. And it's the most incredible learning experience. It's an amazing learning experience. It's not a drug that you take for fun. No. It's not to be trifled with. It's a serious drug that's used to do work on yourself. Okay. And I think I'd be very hesitant to take the drug if you know that you're a person who's not honest with yourself. Yeah. You've done some things bad in the past that you haven't atoned for. Yeah. If you're carrying some dirt, it'll really hold you to account. You will not be able to escape that. It will make you confront that. Yeah. Okay. And as a result of that being the case, I avoided trying it for many, many years. Out of fear. I had friends that had tried it and they'd talk about seeing God. Oh, okay. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not sure whether I want to go to that place, you know. And then when I did have it under very controlled conditions with people assisting and guiding, it was the most incredible experience. The things that I learnt out of that experience about myself was amazing. Yeah. I learnt to accept myself and trust myself. And I came out of it feeling extremely clear. It was like the deck of cards in my head had been all shuffled up incorrectly over years of, just life. Yeah. And then this experience had put them into order again. Right. And absolutely no side effect, no detrimental side effect whatsoever. So no hangover. Zero, nothing like that. But it's also not to be taken while you're taking anything else. You should prepare for a couple of days. You should no alcohol whatsoever, not to be taken in conjunction with other drugs. That's not part of it. Right. And then there's a little, I don't know if it's folklore or not, I've never ever sought to purchase this or I've seen it offered or anywhere, that they say it must come to you as a gift and you're only to give it as a gift. There's not to be money involved in it at all. Okay. I don't think that's going to change the experience. Yeah. No. Not like, drinking alcohol or having other things with it.
I've got many clients that, not in relation to that particular substance, but money's the main driver.
Yeah. Money's the driver. Having said that, I've never seen it for sale. It's not something that I've seen readily available anywhere. No. But quite an incredible thing. But the other drugs, like having meth come onto the scene, it's always meth and alcohol and violence seem to go hand in hand. Yeah. Well, in fact, as you've mentioned, I am a musician and I have a band. I'm part of a band called Three Skin, and on our first album that was released on Spotify. You don't want to have another member join?
No. We're a three-piece.
I'm sure that you've had that joke cracked many times.
Like foreskin, except there's only three of us. Yeah, that's it. But the last song on the first album is we've got bookended Love Story Part 1, or Love Song Part 1, Beer, Sex and Cigarettes, and Love Song Part 2 is Jealousy, Steroids and Ice. Okay. Wow. So, and it's, in fact, I've drawn very heavily on my experience as a legal practitioner to fashion those lyrics, which are pretty much just about, paranoia from drug use leading to jealousy, leading to domestic violence, leading to jail. So
That's exactly what happens.
yeah.
Yeah, you got some sort of paranoia, psychosis, and ice psychosis.
Yes.
Give us your telephone. You're having affairs with other people. No, I don't want to give you my telephone.
Oh, yeah.
They take the telephone, break the telephone, injure the other person as they're scuffling trying to get the telephone, and there we go.
Yeah.
We're in court.
Well, the second verse of my song, you might want to edit this out, is send you to get me beer from down at the store. A man works there that makes you a whore. You must be cheating because you went on your own. Man, you're going to cop it when you get home. So,
Wow,
I mean,
mate. I tell you what, there's a lot of people that will...
Sadly, it's just entirely true. So
Yeah,
but I think I was
a lot of
just
people.
sick of having to come into contact with it every dreary day of my working life. So
I'm a bit over it too.
yeah, the only way I could make sense of it was to sing a stupid song about it. So.
Mate, we're going to draw to a close, but
All right.
before we draw to a close, let us know about your band, let us know about your albums and what's going on for you at the moment.
Right. Well, I'm really playing in two bands at the moment. Three Skin is mainly studio stuff. The guitar player, Chris Main, he's a legal practitioner. He actually works at Atzel's in Brisbane. He is a whiz in the studio. So both of those albums were recorded in the kitchen of
Wow.
the units that he lived in. So, and because it's all digital now, so you don't really need. Well, we've done it without, having to worry about acoustics and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
And we've.
What are the albums, mate?
The first album is called Cautionary Tales.
Yep.
And the second album is called Ditties.
Available on Spotify?
You can get them on Spotify, and there's also, I think you can access them on YouTube as well.
And my type of music, punk style music.
you love it.
I love it. I've always loved that.
We were reminiscing yesterday about the Christmas party in this very building where you were up on the roof singing with the punk band, a song that made you universally
Infamous.
unpopular.
Yeah. Absolutely. Geez, that was a while ago, mate.
It was. All right, Mark. Well, thanks for inviting me in. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, mate.
All
Hope
right.
to see you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Good on you, mate. Thank you very much for listening to another episode of Crime Scene Gold Coast with Guardian Criminal Law. We're enjoying bringing you these podcasts on a weekly basis, and we look forward to bringing you many more. We've got a Patreon page where you can subscribe. That'll assist us in bringing you future episodes, and also any money raised through that goes towards a youth help program that we're running. We look forward to your company for many months to come. Thank you.